My prayer is that you are having a very blessed weekend, this Memorial Weekend, as we remember those that paid the ultimate price, that gave the ultimate sacrifice for the protection of our country. And so I hope you take some time to be thankful for those that have given their lives for our country. This morning, we are going to pick up a little bit where we left off last week. Last week, we talked about what it means to be a true follower of Jesus. And so today, I want to start with, have you ever got one of those offers? One of those invitations? You know, get this credit card, or apply for credit, or get this deal. And it is one of those where it's a great deal, and it's like, you know what? It's open to everybody. No one's refused. I remember one time going into one of those department stores. I don't remember if it was J.C. Penney's. This is years ago when my wife and I were first married. And going in, and I don't remember, they had some gift that they were giving if you would apply for their store card. I don't remember if it was a Sears card or a J.C. Penney's card, but one of those department store cards. So we went ahead and applied for it. And guess what? They told us, no one's ever refused. You'll get this. Not a problem. We didn't get it. It wasn't that we had bad credit. We had no credit. We had no credit record at that point. And so sometimes when you get those offers that everyone is accepted, no one is turned down, you know what? At times, that's just false advertising. They're just trying to convince you to accept their invitation, but not everybody's going to receive it. Well, we're going to talk about an invitation today that is truly an open invitation. Last week we looked at the verse in Luke chapter 9, verse 23, where it says, Then Jesus said to all of them, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Did you notice what it said there? If anyone would come after me. Jesus said, anyone. Anyone is invited. That's the offer. Jesus is saying anyone can follow me. Anyone can choose to be that true follower we talked about last week. And he didn't just speak it. He didn't just do like the advertisers do, make the offer and then start putting, the fine print, the qualifications to say, you know what, that really doesn't mean everyone or anyone. See, because that's the point. Jesus was letting us know that anyone is invited, that this offer, that his invitation, his call is truly for everyone. And to prove it, he did it. He didn't just say it, he did it. Let's look at an example of that today. Look at Matthew chapter 9, verse 9. Matthew 9 and verse 9 says, as Jesus was walking along, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at his tax collector's booth. Follow me and be my disciple, Jesus said to him. So Matthew got up and followed him. Now I want you to think about a moment. This is not part of our culture, our custom, this idea of a master and a disciple. And so when Jesus, as a teacher, a rabbi, would call his students, that's what he's doing here with Matthew. He's calling a student, a disciple, to follow him. Now, the rabbis of his day, this was a common practice. They all chose disciples, men that would come and serve and follow them. And there's the thing. It was men, because first of all, the women didn't even go, they went to school, but they didn't continue on to the further synagogue school where the men did. And so then it wasn't all of the men that were then called by the rabbis. It was the best of the best. They would quiz them. They would test them. They would because the master, the teacher, the rabbi, is looking and saying, I'm going to be judged by the students that follow me. And so he would only choose those students, those disciples that were extremely intelligent, memorized all that they could, were great thinkers. And so when this new rabbi started calling disciples, and he was saying, anyone can follow me. And he proves it by going to someone like Matthew, who's a tax collector. And tax collectors were not the most liked people. Tax collectors were not looked at as upstanding people. And it wasn't just Matthew. It's fishermen like Peter, Andrew, James, and John. It's political activists like Simon the Zealot. It's ordinary people like you and I. Because Jesus wants us to know that his invitation is for anyone. Anyone. And so that blew people's minds. That's why one of the reasons, not just the miracles, but that's one of the reasons people were flocking to Jesus, because his message was, you can all be my disciples. You can all be my followers. You don't have to meet qualifications. You don't have to be the best of the best. You don't have to be perfect. Follow me. In Romans 10, verses 11 through 13, Paul writes this, the scripture says, whoever believes in him will not be disappointed. And then it goes on, this includes everyone, because there is no difference between Jews and Gentiles. God is the same God, or the Lord of all, and richly blesses all who call to him. As the scripture says, everyone, again, everyone who calls out to the Lord for help will be saved. Here's the point. Jesus' invitation is for everyone. It's calling out to everyone. It didn't matter if you were a Jew or a Gentile. It didn't matter if you were a man or a woman. It didn't matter if you were poor or rich. It didn't matter if you were well-educated or uneducated. It didn't matter if you were a white-collar worker or a blue-collar worker. It doesn't matter. Jesus' message was, the invitation is for everyone. So Jesus' invitation, that's our first point. Jesus' invitation is for everyone. That includes me. And so, but you know what? That's great news. But you know what that does? It does away with our excuses. Look at Luke chapter 9, verse 59. Because you see, if he has qualifications, then we can say, well, I'm not good enough. Or, that's for someone else. That's for those people. I'm not that conservative, or I'm not that liberal, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. And so we make our excuses. Listen to what Jesus says in Luke 9 and verse 59. Jesus said to another, follow me. Certainly, but first excuse me. Or he said, certainly, but first excuse me for a couple of days, please. I have to make arrangements for my father's funeral. Now, the question, the first thing is, Jesus is calling him, and the man makes an excuse. And you know what? He makes an excuse which seems like a really valid excuse. You know what? I need to bury my father, make arrangements for his funeral. But to be honest, that would have been taken care of. More so, it was the idea he's saying, I need the proper amount of time to make arrangements, to settle the things that deal with my father's passing. And Jesus is saying, I'm just calling you to follow. I'm not looking for excuses. I'm not accepting excuses. A couple of verses later, Luke 9 and verse 61. Then another said, I'm ready to follow you, Master, but first excuse me while I get things straightened out at home. You know what? And one excuse is as good as another. We make all kinds of excuses, and people will make excuses. You know what? Some of our excuses are our past. Well, you wouldn't accept me, God, if you really knew my past. And here's the deal. Jesus knows your past, and he accepts you anyway. It's us that has difficulty accepting that our past can be forgiven. It could also be, you know what, like the rich ruler. He's got too many possessions. His excuse is, you know what, I don't want to give this up. And you know what the reality is? Jesus isn't asking him to give that up. He's asking him to choose Jesus above the wealth, above the things. And so he's telling us, listen, without qualifications, there are no excuses. Jesus didn't say you have to be rich, you have to be poor, you have to be a man, you have to be a woman, you have to be a Jew, you have to be a Gentile. He said anyone, which means everyone, which means no excuses. So let me ask you this. What has your excuse been? What's your excuse been for not following Jesus? Or, to go back to our lesson last week, for not being a true follower? Oh, we can handle, warming the church chair on Sunday morning. But are we truly following? Are we living our lives to become like our teacher? Because that's what the call is to. That's what the invitation is to be a disciple, to become like the teacher. And that means being with him and spending time with him and learning from him and loving him and then loving others like he loves us. And that's the key of being this true follower. And so what excuses are you making? If you haven't followed Jesus, what's the excuse you're offering? You know what? They're not good enough. And they're not going to be accepted. And if you're already following, but you're not being a true follower, again, what's your excuse? So Jesus, and second, this is our second point, Jesus' invitation accepts no excuses. Nothing's going to be good enough. No excuse, because Jesus hasn't qualified anything. He just says, follow me, wherever you are. For Simon, Peter, James, and John, they left their fishing business behind, and they followed Jesus. For Matthew, he got up and left his tax collector booth. I don't know what it is that God's calling you to pick up and leave behind. And that brings us to our final point. Listen to what Peter's response is. When Jesus was teaching about how difficult it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of heaven because they're trusting in their things, their wealth, instead of God. And so that's when Peter said, in fact, Jesus' response was, you know what, it's more difficult for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than it is for a camel to pass through a needle's eye. Now, some have explained that away and explained it as a gate in Jerusalem that was called the needle, and you'd have to unload the camels and they'd have to get on their knees to go through this gate. And that maybe, I don't know. But the language it used is a needle and a camel going through it. And I'm thinking that's impossible, and that's what I think, Peter and the rest of them were thinking about the rich entering, because they're trusting in their riches, and that's what Jesus is teaching them. It's impossible. If you're going to trust in your riches, you're not going to find the kingdom of heaven. You're not going to follow God. But listen to what Peter says at the conclusion. In Luke 18, verse 28, then Peter said, we've left everything to follow you. We've left our excuses. We've left everything. Nothing is as important as we talked about last week. Nothing is as important as being with you, as following you. We've left everything. You see, that's what Jesus is telling them. There is a cost to follow me. The invitation is an open invitation. It's for everyone, and no excuses are accepted, but there's still a cost. Look at Luke 14 and verse 33. Jesus said it this way. In the same way, this is when he's explaining to them the cost of discipleship. He says, in the same way, none of you can be my disciples unless you give up everything. Now, does that mean we need to rush home, put our houses on the market, sell our vehicles and all our possessions, go live in the woods, in a cave, and have nothing? And that's not what Jesus is teaching. What Jesus is telling us is everything has to be less important than him. Like we looked at last week, every relationship has to be less important than our relationship to him. He has to be the only master, and he has to be the only thing that is worth anything to us. We need to give up everything else. And you know what that means? Use your house. Use your house to serve him. Invite people in. Let that be a place of hospitality to share the message of Jesus. Have Bible studies. Use your car to serve people, to bless others. Use what you have as a blessing to those that are in need. So Jesus' invitation not only is for everyone, and it accepts no excuses, but thirdly, Jesus' invitation costs everything. So as we wrap our lesson up tonight, as we're concluding today, I want you to understand this invitation is such a huge invitation. Yes, there's a cost, but it's for everyone, and there is no reason that you shouldn't accept. Because look at John chapter 12, verse 26. We're going to close with this verse. John 12, verse 26. And it says, anyone, again, there's that word, anyone. Anyone means everyone. Anyone who wants to be my disciple must follow me, because my servants must be where I am, and the Father will honor anyone who serves me. Are you that anyone? Because anyone is everyone, and that includes you. So Jesus says, anyone who wants to be my disciple, here's what you need to do. This is it. Follow me. That's it. Jesus says, follow me. And you know what that means? It means a disciple needs to be, the servant needs to be with his master where he is. And so in that way, the blessing, God's going to honor those that follow, those that are followers, those that accept this open invitation. Yes, there's a cost, but the honor of God lasts for eternity. The invitation has been offered to you because you are anyone, and that means everyone. And so, will you accept Jesus' invitation? I hope you do. God bless. Have a wonderful week.